you guys doing? Good. It is so good to be with you. As Jennifer mentioned, we are continuing in our series, Jumpstart. And if you have been with us, you kind of know what we've covered. If this is your first weekend here, great weekend to be here. The thing is, these messages don't necessarily build upon each other. So you've missed the messages, but you're not going to miss out on what we're talking about today. Over the last few weeks, we've talked about some of these significant areas of life that we could jumpstart as we think about a new year and some of the changes we want for us in our lives. And we started off first and foremost by talking about how do we jumpstart our relationship with God, knowing that that really is the foundation for which everything else sort of flows from. In week 2, we started talking about how we can jumpstart the impact that we have in our workplace, knowing that the places we work, God has put us there for a reason and a purpose, and how can we leverage and walk out our faith in those environments. Last week, we talked about what does it look like for us to jumpstart our parenting. Know that all of us, we want to parent towards the right goal and the right end. And today, we are going to be talking about how do we jumpstart community, but not just any sort of community. We're going to talk about how do we jumpstart intentional community in our lives. Because here's what I believe. The intentional community is the kind of community that God made us for. Now, when I talk about community, I understand that there's different reactions for people. Some people love community, they love relationships, they want to be around other people. And so even saying hey, we're going to talk about why this is a value in your life. You're yeah, I'm there for that. I'm on board. Others of us, that's not our thing. Community is not our thing. And because of that, we have all sorts of reasons why being in a relational environment doesn't work for us. We'll say things like, I'm really busy and I don't have time to be in community, and so that's why I've just never done it. Or we'll say, I've done it before. I've had the experience of being in community, being in a group, and it wasn't for me. The people weren't the right people. It just wasn't the right fit. Now, here's what I would say. I think candidly that might be reality, but it's also just an excuse. I'm sure you've put on clothes in your life before that weren't the right fit, and it didn't prevent you from wearing clothes in the future. You just found something that fit and worked for you. And so, the same is true with community. Yeah, I get the experience. You've been in places where the people and the time or whatever just didn't fit, but you can't deny the fact, or what I'm going to argue is it's clear that this is what God has made us for. He's made us to be in community with other people, whether we appreciate that, value that, or we don't. Now, there's a lot that can be said about community and the importance and the value of it, but I love the way that the words of pastor and theologian Eugene Peterson puts us to kind of frame what we're talking about. This is what Peterson says. He says that there can be no maturity in the spiritual life, no obedience in following Jesus, no wholeness in the Christian life apart from an immersion in and embracing of community. He would go on to say, he says, look, I'm not myself by myself. We need intentional community because spiritual growth happens in community. We need intentional community because as a church, we believe that we grow more in circles than we do in rows, which is why we'll say over and over again that you need to find your people. You need to be in relationship with other people. You need to have intentional community. Now, of course, I've said that a lot, intentional community, but it begs the question, well, what is intentional community? And for us, it's really sort of defined by what we call the ABCs: accountability, belonging, and care. That's the bedrock of what intentional community has. It has accountability, belonging, and care. And what I want to do for some of the time that we have together is to sort of walk us through each of these aspects of intentional community to understand what it looks like and how it plays out, and even biblical examples of what we see this being lived out in Scripture. And so the first thing I want us to talk about is accountability. Now, I understand when I say accountability, that word sort of brings about, like community, all sorts of feelings. Some people love accountability. Others don't. Some people understand, man, I want other people to challenge me and encourage me and make sure I'm doing the things that I said I was going to do. Others are I don't want anyone that involved in my life. I don't want anyone knowing that much what's going on in my life. Anyone who's going to tell me where I'm coming up short in the areas that I wanted to grow. I'm not for that. But here's what I hope you'd understand. Whether you value accountability or not, it is impossible to argue against its effectiveness. Matter of fact, the American Society of Training and Development conducted a series of studies looking at accountability and its effectiveness. And what they found is that if you have something, whatever that is, if you have a desire that you want to change something in your life, if you have a new discipline or practice that you want to put into place in your life, whatever it is that thing might be, if you have people to hold you accountable towards what you desire, there's a 65% chance you'll actually see it come to fruition. Versus like, hey, if you're just like, I want to see this change, but I've told no one else about it, I've asked no one to hold me accountable towards it, the numbers go down drastically. Now, if you go one step further and make a weekly connection with the person you've asked to hold you accountable, the number goes from 65% to 95%. 95% of people who want change in their life, who invite someone else to hold them accountable, and who meet on a regular basis around that, see the change that they desire actually come to fruition. You see, here's what I believe. Accountability helps ensure who we want to be becomes who we are. Accountability ensures who we want to be becomes who we are. Like it's how we make sure that change happens. Now, there's examples of this that play out in the New Testament. One specific example I want us to look at is found in the book of Hebrews. Now, before we actually get to that verse, I want you to kind of understand a little bit of the context of what's happening. When this book is written, the church and Christians at the time are under intense persecution by the Roman Empire. I mean, there are Christians being killed for what they believe. There are people being beat for what they believe. And this is part of the daily experience of people living out their faith in the ancient world. They're butting up against an empire who doesn't want them to live out and profess the things that they're professing. And so when the author is writing this letter, Hebrews, he's writing it to a church that's going through a significantly difficult season. And in that, with that sort of as the background, part of it is the author is encouraging, he's imploring the listeners to hold fast to the faith that they have in Jesus, to hold on to the hope that they have in Jesus. And in spite of their circumstances, in spite of what it is that they're going through, to trust in God's promise, that God is going to do what God says he is going to do. And then this is what we read in Hebrews chapter 10, beginning in verse 24. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. This idea of one another, it involves two people. And the point that the author is making is like, look, as we walk through these experiences, let's motivate each other to do love and good works. Let's see this play out in the lives of each other. Let's hold each other accountable to see this come to practice, that we're displaying love, that we're doing good works to the people around us. Like we see that there's this embedded belief of accountability in the context of relationships in the early church. Now, another point I want to make here is just to be mindful again of the context to which this is being written. I've already mentioned intense persecution for the church. It wouldn't be common for someone you love to come home and be beaten. Maybe someone you love not to come home. People that you care about, their lives being lost, businesses, livelihoods being lost. And in spite of that reality, the church is being implored to act in a way that reflects the love of Jesus, to act in a way that displays his good works candidly to the enemies, to the people who are trying to completely eliminate their way of life. I mean, there's something that should be challenging for us with this. Like, I think of the church today, like when we experience or there's some sort of feeling of persecution for what we believe or how we walk out our faith, the church has a tendency to sort of skirt back instead of lean in. The church has a tendency to sort of look at how it's impacting ourselves rather than seeing this as an opportunity to reflect God's good work and love through the life that we're living. Candidly, to the people who are bringing about the experiences that we'd rather not be going through. And what the writer is telling the church is like, look, as this is going on, you guys have each other. You are accountable to each other. And so motivate one another to do good. Motivate one another to display God's love. You see, accountability only happens in the context of relationships. If you've ever been sort of attempted to be held accountable by someone you don't have a relationship with, you know it doesn't go well. You're like, I don't know who you are. Like, you don't know me. Don't tell me what it is that you want to see in my life that's different. But when we have those relationships, when we invite other people on the journey with us, we put ourselves in the optimal environment to fully become who God has called us to be. To Eugene Peterson's words, apart from others, I can never be myself. And so for us, intentional community begins with accountability. It's sort of the bedrock of it. But again, accountability is birthed out of relationships, and relationships form, and as relationships form, so does the second aspect of that, the B, which is belonging. That we desire as people, and it's okay to admit this, we desire to be in relationship with other people, to have our people, our tribe, individuals who know us, but not just who surface level know us, but who know what's really going on in our lives. People who we know in return. We know what's going on in their lives, the successes and the failures, the joy and the pitfalls, the ups and downs of life. We know the fullness of what someone else is walking through. You see, I believe each and every one of us has an innate desire to know that we are known. Like all of us. We want to know that we are known. And that's true if you're an introvert. That's true if you're not a fan of community. It's true if you are a fan of community. You want to know that someone else knows you. Now, in the Old Testament, there's sort of a great story that supports this, a story that helps us understand what it's like to belong to someone else and to have someone else belong to you. And the story, kind of the setup of it, is there is a lady and she loses her husband. Her husband dies, and at the same time she loses her two sons. Both of them die. And suddenly her whole world is sort of thrown up in a matter of moments. And what I want you to understand is in the ancient world, a woman apart from a husband or a woman apart from male sons had no right or claim to anything. And so any possessions that she once would have had were gone. And any rights that she might have were gone. Like her status rather quickly goes from someone who's seen and belongs to someone who's not seen, and everything that she once held and had or belonged to her no longer belongs to her. It's a moment where this woman, Naomi, starts to come to grips with the reality of what life is going to be like moving forward. And so she decides to do what the noble thing is. She pulls her daughter-in-laws together and she says, look, you need to go back to your homes. You need to go back to your families because there you will have belonging. There you will have people. There you will have possessions. There you will have a sense of connection and community. But if you stay here, I have nothing. And Orpah, one of them, says, okay, that's fine. Thank you for releasing me. She decides to go home and to be back with her family, but her other daughter-in-law, Ruth, decides, no, I'm going to stay with you. And Naomi thinks, okay, well, Ruth doesn't understand the implications of what has happened. She doesn't understand of what their future will look like. Like again, everything's going to drastically change for them overnight, and so she attempts to explain to Ruth the reality of their life moving forward, and this is Ruth's response in Ruth 1, verse 16. Ruth says, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Ruth essentially tells Naomi, I belong with you. And consequently, Naomi, you belong with me. that we were meant to walk this journey together, and as long as we're together, then neither of us are alone. That no matter what the future sent their way, there was just this belief in them that they could tackle it together. You see, intentional community gives you, it gives me, it gives all of us a place to belong, a place to know that we are truly known. And let's just be honest, that's no small gift, right? Like, I'm sure all of us have experienced the ups and downs of life. Like, there's been seasons where it feels like life is just going and everything's great, and then out of nowhere, it's sort of like a gut punch that just surprises you. You know, or you're in this like season where it feels like you're starting to climb out of it, and maybe you see the light of day for a moment, but then things take a turn and it seems to go into a difficult direction once again. Or maybe you've experienced, maybe you find yourself in a season right now where it's sort of like this, man, everything's great, it's good, life is good, but you know how quickly things can change. And when that happens, when life turns, even if it's a turn for the better, we all look for our people. We all look for people to celebrate with. Or we look for people to sit with. Because we desire to belong. We desire to have a place where we're fully known. And so that's why, when it comes to intentional community, belonging is so important. It's not just that you know someone's name, but you belong with these people. Because inevitably there'll become a moment, which is the C part, that you'll need to experience some sort of care. Accountability, belonging, and care. We all have these moments in our life, again, when life turns, where we need to be cared for. And I think, if just we're being honest for a moment, I think there's something with us as men that we don't like to admit that need. Like, it's sort of a pride that masks itself in bravado. Like I'm good. Like, I don't have any needs. And I guess it's not just men. I've met women who are like, no. Like, they're so focused on caring for the needs of other people that they don't want to acknowledge their own needs. But here's the thing. All of us have seasons of our life that we need to be cared for. All of us have things that we need people who are walking along with us to come alongside and help support us in these moments, whether we admit it or not. Whether we acknowledge, I have a moment that I need to be cared for or not, we all experience those seasons. And one of the things that we see within the context of Christian community throughout the New Testament is the church was there to care for and support each other. Matter of fact, Paul sort of gives us an example of what this looks like and how the church comes alongside each other. But before he shares what I want us to look at, he sets up an illustration that is going to be familiar to a lot of you, especially if you're a Christian here. Paul talks about this idea of the body of Christ. And for Paul, it's this idea that the body is made up of different parts. You got fingers, you got eyes, you got ears, you got arms, legs, all of that. They're individual pieces, but they all come together to form one body. And collectively, what the body does together is almost more important than what the body does individually. But he doesn't just sort of stop there. He leads into this in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 25. He says, "This makes for harmony among the members of the body, so that all the members care for each other." Paul says, look, there's an expectation among the body of Christ that there is mutual care for one another. Now, I get that's a little different. A lot of times when we talk about the body of Christ, we only think about it through the lens of giftings, right? Like, you have the gift of, hospitality, you have the gift of teaching, you have the gift of musicality. Like, we have all these gifts, and all these gifts come together as a church so that we can do the work that God has called us to. Yes, that's part of it, but it goes beyond gifting. What Paul is saying is the body is there to care for one another. And then he continues. He says this in verse 26. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. And if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. Paul says, look, you exist together to support and care for one another. through good and bad, through seasons of grief and loss, despair, sickness, sadness, and so much more. When you walk through these seasons, it's not your experience. They're not unique to you, but it's shared among other people. That we carry the burden together. We celebrate the joy together. That what you're going through is not unique to you. And I think so often that's sort of the lie that we tell ourselves. I'll just say it's a lie of Satan. Like no matter what it is that you're going through, you're the only one who can understand. You're the only one who's ever experienced it. You're the only one who knows what that reality is like. And so we start to say, okay, well, if that's true, then I can't share this with someone else. Because if I share it with someone else, well, they won't understand. Or if I share this with someone else, they'll see me as odd because I'm the only one who goes through it. And so we begin to believe this narrative. We begin to believe a lie that insulates ourselves and prevents other people from caring for us. And when we believe that lie, we begin to walk out a life that is counter to the calling that God has given us. We're called to be in relationships. We're called to have intentional community, to have accountability, belonging, and care. And I know, especially for some of you, if you've been around church for a long time, you'll think, well, I've been in a community before, and that's not what I've experienced. That's not what it was surface level. There was no accountability. I didn't get a sense that I belonged there or that people cared enough to care about me. But here's what I would say maybe is a challenge to that. It begins with you. To the level to which you are willing to be transparent and honest is the level to which you invite other people to do the same. And so if you've only experienced a surface level sort of approach to community or experience around community, perhaps it's because you haven't been authentically who you are. See, one of the things I believe is it's impossible for someone to fully know the fake version of who you are. And we're really good at the facade. We're really good at putting up, hey, this is who I am. This is the exterior. When it's a lot harder to talk about what's really going on. And I think it's only when we're transparently who we are, when we're willing to share the fullness of who we are, that we can begin to experience the benefits of intentional community. But it does. It takes a risk. It takes some boldness, a willingness to step out and maybe allow others to see who you are for all the ups and all the downs. Now, I could talk a lot about what intentional community looks like and how it plays out and why you should get involved in intentional community. But rather than me just sitting up here or talking up here about the importance of it, I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear from people in our church who've taken that step, who've stepped out and who've begun to experience for themselves what intentional community really looks like. So would you do me a favor? Would you put your hands together as we welcome up Bree Jerish and Brandon and Morgan McGee? So we did this first service, and so they think they know all the questions I'm going to ask them. So I'm going to mix it up. No, I won't do that to you guys. We'll keep it pretty standard to first service. But I think one of the things is helpful for people to hear is tell us about how you got into community here to begin with, because there's people sitting out here who are in intentional community. They're in a community group. But there are people who've not yet taken that step, and I think hearing from someone else who's been on a journey like them would be good. So whoever wants to go first.
I guess you went first every time last service. So I had been coming to this church, quote unquote, for a while now because on Tuesdays they play basketball here. If you look down, it's a basketball floor, so please be easy on the floor. I like playing here. But I've been coming here for a while playing basketball, and Brent Miller is the guy who runs that part of the ministry. And he had been asking me, hey, early on I've been coming, he asked me, hey, do you want to join a group with my wife? We run this community group. It's focused around couples and in the same season of life. And at that time, I was like, no, I don't want to. Thank you. But Brent is the type of person that he is a gentle spirit, but he's a pestering spirit. But he'll keep prodding and asking. So periodically he would ask me. And then I think it was about 3 years ago, he asked me and said, hey, my wife and I are starting up our community group again. Would you like to join? I didn't say no that time. I think it might have been God prompting me to do something a little different in how we've been going about our faith walk. And I told him, I'll talk to my wife about it and see what she says. And then we went home. I went home and talked to her and said, hey, Brent said they're starting up again. Do you want to join? We both looked at each other like, oh, we don't know anybody there. It's kind of nerve-wracking, but we made that commitment to just at least try it out. And as soon as we went that first day, we knew that's where God wanted us to be, especially for this season of life, because the people that we started that group with are still in that group, and it's been our family. Like the pastor said, they've been our rock through many different seasons of life. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Brandon said, I think it was just the right timing that God placed us there. We, well, like you said, you've been playing basketball for years here, probably like 10 or 11 years, and 8 of those years, Brent was asking us to come and off and on come join their group. We weren't going to church here. We just didn't feel like it was the right time. But then I think it was right in the middle of COVID, and we were also looking for a new church. And yeah, he asked him, and we're like, well, we might as well just try it out and see how it goes. And we just immediately felt welcomed. And then we started coming to church here, and it made all the difference of our church experience too, because we got to see those same people on Sunday mornings. And yeah, it was great to, see the people you meet midweek. You see them on Sundays too. It's like, hey, how's it going? How's your week? And it was good.
Yeah. Well, I think for all of us, it's a process, right? And all of us, we respond as the timing's right, the fit's right. I would say to people, you don't need to take 8 years. you can do it faster, but you know what? You want to be faithful to what God is doing. Bree, what about your experience?
I've been coming to Lake Sawyer for a couple of years now, and I joined the Rooted group that they offered in the fall one year, and it was really encouraged to join another community group to stay involved with a group of people. But when I looked at the list of groups that were available at the time, I just didn't feel like I really fit in any of them. And Jennifer prompted, and then came back and prompted again and said she was going to be starting an all-ladies group, and I was all out of excuses. And so I ended up trying it, feeling really out of my comfort zone, and sitting down with a group of ladies I had never met really before, except for a couple of them. And it's been a pretty awesome experience so far.
Yeah. Well, I think you can kind of hear it in their stories, but here at Lake Sawyer, we're going to lovingly pester you into community because we value it. We think it's that important. Now, both of you said something that I think it would be most people's concern. It's like, I don't know anybody. You're like, I don't know anybody, or maybe I know a few people, but I don't really know the kind of group that I'm stepping into. So talk about how you go from I don't know anybody to the sense of belonging that you have within your group today.
I would say for us, my wife more so than me, I can be pretty social. She's a true introvert. But when we stepped into that group, it was welcoming because the first day we went to group, it was kind of a heavy topic and a heavy conversation, and we were the new people there, and they were just having conversation, and just for us to see the level of vulnerability that they had in that group and the level of care that one another had for specific people going through specific things, it really opened our eyes to say, hey, they really get it. Like they don't just talk, they don't just surface level things. They're talking about deep, real issues, and they're rallying around each other. And for us, is like, that's what we needed. That's what we needed in our marriage. That's what we needed in the time of our life for our faith walk. And it just brought this sense of community for us that we had been missing. I feel like it really helped our marriage at that point in time. It really helped us grow to see other Christian couples at that time to be able to walk through life and just feel like they see us for who we are, not, like you said, the facade that we can give off, or that wall or barrier that we want to put up, because being vulnerable takes a lot.
Yeah.
And that we just feel like we can go in there and say anything. There's some wild stuff that gets said. There's a lot of prayers. There's a lot of laughing. There's a lot of crying. But it's just, you feel comfortable and belonging. You feel like you belong.
Yeah. So like what happens in group stays in group.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Bree, what about you? What was your experience?
So like I said, I joined a group of women that 90% of them I didn't know. And pretty early on, within the first few weeks, there was something that I'd been praying for personally for probably the better part of a year at that point. And it popped out in the prayer requests that night. And it continued to be my prayer request each week. And these women prayed with me and they prayed for me. And about 11 months down the road, my prayer got answered in this room. It radically answered. And it was, aside from my mother and my best friend, this group of women were the only ones that knew that this is what I was praying for. And not only knew it, but were praying it with me. And I was so excited to tell them that next Wednesday that, this is what the Lord did. This is what we as a family in this room accomplished through our prayers, and how grateful I was for them in that process. That level of intimacy got built in less than a year, which I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we see in both your stories, like I take yours for example, is like, I don't know these people, and then 11 months later, something you've been long praying for, God answers, and some of the first people you want to celebrate that is your group, who like you had no relationship really, or before that. And I know that's even been your guys' experience, some of the joys. Morgan, maybe you can share a little bit about just your sense of belonging within that group.
Yeah, like Brandon said, I'm very introverted, and so it wasn't something that was comfortable going into a new group. We've been a part of small groups or community groups in our past churches that we've been to, and just never really felt that full sense of belonging. And I think it really came down to how real and vulnerable this group was being from the get-go. The first day after we just both were leaving, and we were just so thankful that God put us there and opened that door for us, because we just, like Brandon said, we needed it at that time in our lives. And everyone was going through very similar things with young kids and marriage, and so it's cool to experience joys and, what's the opposite of joy? Sorrows with the group. And yeah, just feeling that sense of belonging is great.
Well, I think all of us, that I mentioned that innate desire to be known. I think we could be I want a place to belong. I want my people. I want to know who that is. The harder part for most of us is the other two aspects of intentional community: accountability and care. Both that takes a different level of vulnerability. So maybe can you guys talk, and you can either take one or the other, about when you've experienced accountability in group or when you've experienced care from your group. Bree, we'll throw it to you first.
I'll take the accountability one. I had this moment at one point with the Lord where he asked me to clean up a few things in my life that I maybe would be leading a group at some point, and I didn't feel like I was in a place where that was appropriate. And so I started tidying these things up, and within 24 to 48 hours, I got a text from Jennifer that asked me to take over one one session leading because she wasn't going to be there, and I was pretty hesitant about it, but I felt like I was obedient. This is okay. So I took that step, and I did one night, and I continued to work towards whatever this goal was. I don't really know that I knew what the goal was. I just knew that I needed to be obedient in what I was choosing for my life. And I was doing it with this group of women that were holding me accountable to be there every week and be a part of this each week. And then we took our summer off, and I did a study with a friend of mine. And when we came back from our summer break, Jennifer told me that was the study we were going to do. And I said, oh, well, that's funny. I just did that study this summer, and it's a great one. We're going to love it. And she goes, oh, that's great. You want to lead it? And I was like, that's not really what I was going for when I said that. We're just going to love it. And so I thought about it for a little bit, and I just felt the Lord just, tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, but this is what I asked you to be obedient for. This is what I was preparing you for. You get to say yes to this. And so I took that on, and I got to sit in a room with these women that I already knew and I was already comfortable with, which helped make this a much easier process. And I was much more accountable to them because I was taking on the role of guiding our conversations and being prepared with these videos and lessons ahead of time. And it was a really cool experience. It was definitely outside of the box for me. But I'm glad that they were there to walk through it with me. It was much better that way.
So be careful what you ask for, or in your case, just be careful for what you even say. Yes. Well, that's great. What about you guys? What experienced accountability or care in your group?
I would say for care in our group, we have had 2 babies since we joined the group. I think I was pregnant with our second when we joined, and it was very new to us after we had him. They started this meal train for us, and people just started bringing us meals, and we're like, this is great. Like, we don't have to cook, and we can just chill out and relax and enjoy this time that's normally a very, stressful season having a newborn. I mean, some people enjoy the newborn season. I was not one of those people. And so having our community group just rally around us and bring us meals and love on us and reach out and just ask how we're doing for both of our younger 2 kids now has been great. And it's just been so sweet to be able to do that for them as well, because, I mean, we're all in that same season, so there's a lot of babies being had right now in our group. So it's been really sweet.
Brandon, go ahead.
I would say that. And as far as care, we have a group text that I would say daily almost. Somebody's throwing something out. Hey, can you guys pray for this? Or hey, this is going on in our lives. It's whether it be something joyful or something that's not so good. And we're all rallying around in that, even in that small aspect of just a text message and people checking in. I had knee surgery during, and people were reaching out, hey, you guys need anything? We know there's a lot going on. And as far as accountability, I know Brent and Sherry, our group is really focused on marriage. And they make us prioritize our marriage. Obviously, we put God first in all that we do and talk about that, but it's really about our marriage and how we should focus on our spouses and not so much the little ones because they grow up and leave us. And so making sure there's a foundation there with your marriage, and they tell us, they challenge us to go out on share dates. They challenge us to read and pray together and just holding each other accountable on that aspect of it. And it's really cool because once you start seeing that level of expectancy from other people, you really start to hold yourself accountable too, because we grew to a level with this group that we love them. That's our family. And so we want to be there each week to show up for them. And there's a million excuses that we can make each and every week. We got 3 kids. We can't go this week. We got this, that, or the other. But we hold ourselves accountable to the group to make sure that we're there, that we show up, and we're there for them in those areas of need as well.
Yeah, because I think it's not just what the group provides to us, right? It's what we provide to others. And I think that's where there's that built-in accountability. And I thought, you said this, Morgan, first hour. I thought it's just so cool. It's even you guys are able to be here today because someone else in the group has got your kids who are at basketball right now, jumping in.
Or her holding our baby so we can be up here. Allison just hanging out on the side.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, it really is like you see these things play out, and they're not always comfortable. They challenge and stretch us, but in these places, in intentional community, we really have the opportunity to grow into who God has called us to be. Now, maybe last question. There's people sitting here, and they've at one point let me say this again. They're either in community or they're sitting over there thinking, I don't know if this is right for me. So you can kind of recognize where they're at. What would be one piece of encouragement or advice that you would give them to help maybe push them over the edge to help them take a step into community? We'll have all of you go. So, Morgan, you haven't gone first
All
yet.
right,
So,
okay. I think it's so important to find a good fit for the season that you're in, whether it's a women's group or a marriage group or whatever that looks like. I think finding that right time in your life to join the group really helps set it up for success. If you go and you try one out and it isn't the right thing, then don't be afraid to try a different one. And then when you are there, just be vulnerable and be real and be really willing to give to the group what you maybe want to get back in return. It's just being as real as you can and not, like Pastor was saying, having people learn the fake version of you. I can't remember how it went, but it's a lot easier to just be yourself and welcome those into your life.
yeah. Brandon?
I would say for me, it really helped me understand what church was, because when we think of church, we think of coming here on a Sunday and listening to Pastor Mike talk and have a message, and that you go home and you use that message throughout the week. But when you look at like Acts and you see how church really was, it was really in small groups that they really started to grow. And that they really started to progress in the faith and really grew it. And so for me personally, that's where I've seen my faith take off, is in small groups. Yes, I'm going to come to church on Sunday. Yes, I'm going to listen to Pastor Mike. I'm going to do my due diligence there. But it's really the people in that group that help me be the best me, challenge me, really making sure that I'm okay as a person, because there's a lot of things that we can really get distracted with throughout the week. And to have that group, we're going to group on Thursday. That's exciting for me to know that I'm going to be there, that I can be around the people that I love, that I can talk to and express the things that I need to express. And they're going to see me for who I am and not judge. So if you're in that season of life where you're feeling called or you're feeling like God keeps tapping on your shoulder, like, hey, somebody keeps inviting you, I would listen to that, because I feel like that's where your faith takes off. As much as we want to put stock in Sundays and coming here on Sundays, church is done Monday through Saturday. And that's with your community group, and that's with the people that you love and that you trust and that you can call on for prayer and that you can call on in a time of need. And that's what our community groups provide.
Yeah, thank you. Bree?
I think if the Lord's putting it on your heart, if he's utilizing somebody in this building to nudge you in that direction, to choose to say yes to the Lord for that. Choose to try it, even if it's outside your comfort zone. That obedience will bring a new kind of peace. And that experience, well, it's brought me a lot of joy. I think it can bring a lot of people joy to have that kind of community, and it changes the way this room feels on a Sunday morning when you're in it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. Would you give them a round of applause for being up here? Thank you, guys. Yeah, I think you hear it in their story. They were either lovingly nudged or pestered again and again before they finally took a step. And they've kind of talked about if you're being nudged, it's time for you to take a step. But let me just take it one step further. I will not stop pestering you. You need to be in community. And I don't just say it like, hey, you need it. Like, I'm in a community group. Like, I'm walking with people because I understand the value of it. I still understand the importance of it. You need to be in community. And if that's something you're going to take issue with, then, like, you're not going to like it around here, because we're going to talk a lot about it. And I'm just wondering if today isn't the day for you to take that step, to step into intentional community. And I know for some of you, you're like, well, I got my people. Like, I got my people in my life. I don't need more people. I even have some sense of accountability, belonging, and care. Like I'm experiencing that in the relationships that I already have. And here's what I would say. If those relationships aren't pushing you to be more and more like Jesus, then it's not the kind of intentional community that God designed us for. He designed us to be in relationship with others who would help us grow more into the likeness of His Son, Jesus. People that we can help challenge and push to grow more into the likeness of Jesus. And that's what we want for each and every one of you. And so I'm gonna nudge you. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna implore you. I'm gonna pester you to take a step. And here's what that looks like today. We want to encourage you, if you want more information about a community group, if you want to sign up for a community group, you can go to the program. You can scan that QR code, the seat back in front of you. Or to make it really easy, you can go to lakesawyerchurch.org/group finder. And there's a listing of groups that we have available today that start up in a few weeks. And if you don't see something that's there, right below it is a group interest form. Take a second to fill that out, because often we form groups out of that because there's people who have a different need or in a different season of life, and we want to surround you with people who are on a similar journey as you are. So I'm going to ask that you would take a step. And Morgan said something I think is super important, that like if you don't find the right people, don't give up. There's a reason when we launch a group, we say you're not committing forever, you're committing to 90 days. 90 days to find out if these people can be your people. And if not, no harm, no foul. Step out. We'll help you find other community. But this is what I've found to be true again and again and again. If you're willing to be authentically you, and other people in that group are willing to be authentically who they are, those people will quickly become your people. But you have to make a decision. You have to make a choice, and you have to choose to take a step. And if you do, when you do, hopefully not 8 years, I promise you, you're going to experience not only the kind of community, but the kind of life in Christ that you didn't think was possible. Because this is what God has made us for. And if we're followers of Jesus, we're called to step into the things that He has designed us to experience. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you so much for the way that you modeled for us what relationships look like. The way the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit live relationally among each other. And the way that gives us a vision of what it looks like to be an intentional community ourselves. And God, I pray as individuals that we'd have the strength and the boldness to maybe look past the objections and the obstacles and the hurdles and the why nots and embrace the why. To take a step and to see, God, what you will do with it. As complete strangers, quickly become the people we walk life with. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.